invitation, my monopolist invitation, that's the first time I ever made a joint conference in the Netherlands. And thanks to give me the opportunity to make here a conference about one of West's most important contributions to the Christian Marxist dialogue, which was by a philosopher, a German philosopher, a dissident Marxist, dissident philosopher, which name is Ernst Bloch. Ernst Bloch, who was effectively wrote in his exile as an anti-fascist, staying 12 years in the United States between 1938 to 1948, where it was written in Marlborough near Cambridge, Massachusetts, near Boston. This great theology, which was worldwide known under the name The Principle of Hope. But the original name of this book, which has been translated into 30 languages, was Dreams of Better Life. There is a moment it changed. The discussion was Dreams of Better Life. Where the Principle of Hope is, there are the Dreams of Better Life of this poor Jewish philosopher who was obliged to go to exile in 1933 because from the list of the Jewish personalities who were persecuted by the Nazi regime in March 1933. But this book was really a great event, and the actuality of this controversial book is evidently due to the fact that it's a thesis, that it highlights the thesis that the best thing about religion is that it makes for heretics. That only an atheist can be a good Christian. Only a good Christian can be a good atheist. A statement which has been easily interpreted, of course, of official representatives of Protestant Catholic theology as a provocation qualified to disturb the self-consciousness of so many Orthodox believers and theologians among the Christian community, being afraid of this radical dispute of the theological dogmas by a Marxist philosopher who had been considered from 1949 to 1956 as the official philosopher of the German Democratic Republic, the DDR. Bloch was always considering himself as a religious atheist. Religious atheist. Well, it's quite interesting to analyze this concept. And, well, also it was a way to ask Bloch not only to consider him as the most productive heretic in Marxism in the 20th century, but also as the most theoretic lecturer and interpreter of the Bible after Baruch Spinoza in the 17th century. He was excommunicated by the Rabbi Martelda in Amsterdam from the Jewish community of Amsterdam because of his dispute of the official dogmas of Judaism, but also because of his defense of liberty, rationality, and gladness of knowledge. That's the same because of his engagement for human emancipation from constraint, servitude, and tyranny. And this book, the book Atheism and Christianity, Atheismus im Christentum, not Atheismus und Christentum. This is interesting with this book. Atheism Christianity is the effort to raise the criticism of the Bible from the pure philological point level to the significance of a political vision of the world. It is directed against the assertion of Luther that they have absolutely to respect the written word. Das Wort sie sollen lassen stehen. It's a critical lecture of the Bible for no philological reasons, but for philosophical and political reasons. It's not an accident that Bloch dedicated this book not to a Protestant theologian as Paul Tillich, but to Adolf Lowe. Lowe, a specialist of political economy, who met Ernst Bloch during his exile in the United States. And because his aim, his purpose was to read and to reinterpret the Bible in the perspective of the materialist economical conception of history of Marxism. Concretely, this means this critical lecture is guided by the intention to select to extrapolate and to underline all the text emphasis of the Bible, which can be interpreted as a refusal, as a denial of the justification of oppression. The same is to make evident in this rebellious activity derived by the special lection of the Bible, which came to light during the Peasants' Revolution in the last Middle Ages in Germany in the 16th century, which was permanently stimulated and encouraged by the revolutionary sermons of Thomas Müntzer. And as Bloch is analyzing in Atheism and Christianity, is the first great expression of this rebellious and atheistic elements in the Bible was uncontestably the book of Job in the Ancient Testament. The book of Job, where Job, with his great pains and sufferings, is openly defying and accusing God, Yahweh, exhibiting, as Bloch says, his communist fist. This was fascinating Bloch. That was fascinating Bloch as a philosopher, who in several respects is quite near to the existentialists. It is the evolution, the shift from this moaning, the murmuring of the people of Israel to the revolt. The shift from the fear, the anxiety, to an attitude of resistance, to the posture of standing upright, aufrechter Gang. So he underlines that we shall always find in the Bible there's two attitudes. First, one is of passive fear and anxiety, and simultaneously a rebellious attitude of resistance and of self-affirmation against oppression. Wider den Stachelblöcken. That joke is here evidently a typical representative of the second case. In this perspective, Bloch tries to outline a non-conformist hermeneutics of religious faith, making every effort to put in evidence the different forms and expression of the revolt which are present in the Bible, but which had been drowned aside by the official theology of the Church. And one of the aims is the de-theocratization of belief. Grandiloquently, Ernst Bloch is opposing the Biblia Pauperum, the Bible of the poor and suffering men, to the Bible of the lords, underlining the precedence of this decisive effects in the Bible against the high rank, to say God of the priest, calling for a revolt against them. So, and according to Bloch, the is the best of religion is that it makes heretics. This consequently has to incite us to read the Bible of its further history of heresy, because it's leading us against all the Bible civilities, the slavishness, against the idolatry of the lords, against the heteronomic mythology, to the very treasure of the Bible, which has not been destroyed by the slogan, out Caesar, out Christus. Yeah, because this is slogan Bloch is opposing in conformity to the spirit of the principle of hope and to the spirit of the exodus of the Jewish people from Egypt. That's from the country where the Jews had been liberated from servility and slavery by Moses. The slogan, where there is hope, there is also religion. Wo Hoffnung ist auch Religion. Because human hope, in alliance with the better new, will be the best criticism of religion, understood as a repressive and regressive tie against domination and oppression. So to hope, this means, according to Ernst Bloch's definition, to transcend, but to transcend without transcendence. That's what the Benjamin in Dives to Rush history against the fur, gegen den Strichbürste, with his 18 theses on philosophy of history. Ernst Bloch tries to find out, with his critical lecture of the Bible, which was much more critical than the other, because this lecture of Spinoza in the Treaty of the Political Theology in the 17th century, to select, to reconstruct the subversive contents of the Bible. this, to say, this antistatic antithesis, where because of the messianic substitution of Lord by Jesus Christ, the new of the Bible, the novum, will be confirmed as the most radical heresy. This is, in this sense, we must understand the central slogan of Ernst Bloch's book on atheism and Christianity. Only an atheist can be a good Christian, only a Christian can be a good atheist. This one was wonderful, was not accepted at all by friends of Theology, of Christians, and you know, there's Rancho 2 years later, who from 1975 replied, it published a book, a critic to this statement, this thesis of Ernst Bloch. Even as I try to underline in my biography of Ernst Bloch, l'Utopie concrète d'Ernst Bloch, une biographie published in Paris in 201, is Bloch, with this radical position, the author of the Principle of Hope is leading to a double struggle against simultaneously on two fronts. First, against all the theocratical and autopraxical conceptions in the three monotheist religions, Judaism, Christianism, Islam, where men are deprived of their autonomy and where rules, norms, and behaviors are prescribed and imposed to him in total heteronomy. And two, against the dogmatic and bureaucratic banishment in the name of atheism of all religions, of all forms of faith and metaphysics, in the name of atheism, of all religions, of all forms of faith and metaphysics, as superstition and mystics by a very dogmatic Marxism, Leninism, which was practiced during the whole of era of Stalin in the Soviet Union and its satellites, so also in Eastern Germany, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and so on, as an ideology of legitimation of the bureaucratic dictatorship of the apparatchiks of the party in the name of the dictatorship of the proletariat. That was the problem. The consequence was that in the Soviet sphere of domination, where the official doctrine of the state was atheism, as part of a so-called scientific vision of world of Marxism-Leninism, in spite of the guarantees of practice of faith. For instance, in the constitution of the ex-German Democratic Republic, it was not respected. Many Christians have been discriminated. There was a real opposition in Eastern Germany by political against Christians, against this authoritarian pro-Russian government of Walter Ulbricht and Erich Honecker, who contributed in October 1991 to the collapse of the regime and to buy some peaceful revolution in Leipzig and in East Berlin. And among them, this and that, there were a lot of Christians, political engaged Christians on the left side. And but this happened when Bloch was yet out of the GDR, because he left it in August 1961, after having dismissed officially by the party of his function of professor of philosophy at the University of Leipzig. Then, August 1967, 1 week before the construction of the wall, of the Berlin Wall, he went out to Western Germany because he had a passport, has been invited by Wieland Wagner to assist the festival of Richard Wagner in Bayreuth. And so, when he wanted to go back to Leipzig, meanwhile, the Berlin Wall had been constructed, and he decided to stay. He did not return to Leipzig. Well, defending this the theory of the presence in the Bible of atheistic and materialist elements and of significant elements of emancipation of humankind from oppression, defending the utopian dimension of an authentic religiosity here in the framework of this eschatology, against the conservative forms of practice of faith in the official churches, defending the theology of liberation theology, criticizing simultaneously the intolerant atheist point of view on religion by the Marxist-Leninist orthodoxy and the dictatorship of the apparatchiks in the Eastern states, the Soviet sphere, and etc. Bloch ran really the risk to be in an awkward position because his position was not the non-conformist point of view of an anti-dogmatic Marxist, liberal Marxist philosopher who considers himself as an atheist religious man. His position was incompatible with two orthodoxies. First, orthodoxy and conservatism, not only by the Christian churches, Catholics, Protestants, but also of Judaism. He also was a Jew, and by the Marxist Leninist orthodoxy with its very dogmatic refusal of all religions and all forms of religious consciousness in the name of scientific atheism, leading to intolerance and also persecution of all forms of religious faith and activity. That's a fact. Yeah? And well, for time reasons, I will try to summarize it. Let's discuss notes. There's a great number of developments I can present here. I miss my it is really what I would say when I try to analyze this is the look of a humanistic, anti-dogmatic, and anti-Stalinist Marxist, who with his positions on atheism is often quite near to the critical positions of Spinoza, of Feuerbach, and Marx. But his first aim is to put to evidence the existence of atheistic, utopian, and revolutionary elements in the Bible and in a hidden, secret, and underhand history of Christianism. And that's why he's focusing, among other things, on the heretic movements, Christian movements in the 15th and 16th century in Central Europe. The Hasids, Bohemian Taborites, the Millenarists in the 16th century, the sects of the Anabaptists, guided by Jean de Leyde, and ruling for some months in the German town of Münster in the 16th century, and especially on the revolutionary Protestant theologian and preacher Thomas Müntzer, who instigated the German peasants of the province of Thuringen in rebellion against the feudal landlords, with a great number of quotations of the Ancient Testament, especially of the prophets Amos, Daniel, Jeremy, and so on. And he was a left-wing rival of Martin Luther during the German Reformation. So it's very significant that Ernst Bloch in this chapter of Atheism and Christianity, this book, the original edition, 1968, which is dedicated to the analysis of the relationship of Marxism to the religion, pleads against a too dogmatic and reduced interpretation of the famous quotation of Marx, in the introduction to the criticism of Hegel's philosophy, who gets religion is the opium of the people. Underlining that another important element is existing in the assertion, which has been totally ignored by vulgar Marxism and materialism, emphasizing that the vulgar materialists have isolated this assertion of Marx completely out of its real context. And he is pointing out the authentic version of Marx's assertion and Marx's criticism of religion. But so religion is a fantastic realization of the human being. I'm citing Marx. Religion is a fantastic realization of the human being, because the human being has no true reality. The religious misery is simultaneously A, the expression of the real misery in the world, and B, the protestation against the real existing misery. So religion is a sign of the suffering creature, the expression of a heartless world, and it is the spirit of unspiritual conditions. It is the opium of the people. This was the authentic prophet of Marx, also has written. It's only the last phrase was cited, so you must comprehend one real understanding of this. You must really read the whole paragraph, not only the last. But this critic of religion culminates by Marx with the teaching that man is the supreme being for the mankind, with a categorical imperative to overthrow all conditions where man is humiliated, subjugated, abandoned, and a despised being. Ernst Bloch totally agrees to Marx's conclusion that the task of history after the disappearance of the hereafter of the truth, is to establish the truth of this side. And that the task of philosophy, after having unmasked the sacred figure of human self-alienation, is to unmask the self-alienation in its non-sacred figures. So that consequently, the criticism of the heaven will be transformed into criticism of the earth, the criticism of religion into criticism of law, and the criticism of the theology into criticism of politics. Especially underlines in this context that contrary to the dogmatic views of the vulgar dogmatized Marxism, the sermons in the German Peasants' War by Thomas Münzer were much more than a pure religious cover, as affirms Kautsky, but that they were really inspired by the Bible, that they were a social criticism in the tradition of the sermons of the prophets of the Ancient Testament, Amos, Daniel, Ezekiel, and so on. It's also very significant for Bloch's thought process, that he is defending against the great representative of Marxism, which was Kautsky, who is, in his great book on the German Peasants' War, was criticizing Thomas Münzer's apocalyptical mystic, the Christian mystic of Master Eckhart, who was very influenced by the Neoplatonism of Plotin, underlines the importance of this heretic thought and movement in the late Middle Ages, pleading against Kautsky's dogmatic condemnation of all mystical thought as reactionary. Bloch puts to evidence that if Master Eckhart's Neoplatonic doctrine of the one, Trachten in die Erstigkeit, was so widely condemned by the papal bull of excommunication, that's why it really instigated the people to revolt them against the authorities, against injustice and the hierarchy of the church. And Bloch is, I think, the only Marxist philosopher of the 20th century who seriously defends Master Eckhart and other symbols and mystics in the Middle Age, considered as heretics, as Jan Hus, Angelus Silesius, or Joachim di Fiori, underlines that Master Eckhart's sermon on the eternal birth, Sermon von der ewigen Geburt, is the absolute proof that Master Eckhart's revolutionary and heretic conceptions of the mystic unity of man with God has really nothing to do with the conception of religion as self-alienation according to Marx's criticism of religion. Because the subject living in a kind of personal union with the Lord could only be a very bad serf. But his measures and critics of the vulgar Marxism, yes, and implicitly to the canonized Marxism-Leninism of the period of Stalin, is that from his own non-orthodox point of view, Marxism as a mediaized jump from the realm of necessity to the realm of liberty, implicates to assume the whole subversive and anesthetic inheritance which is already present in the Bible as an exodus from the statics, as a protestation, and as an archetype for the realm of freedom and liberty, as subsumption of the hate where human beings are not existing as a form of transcending by the revolt, by a transcending without transcendence. Because the Bible can be read with the intention of Ernst Bloch, with the eyes of the Communist Manifesto, which has as consequence that the atheistic thought shall not become foolish, but that what is implicated in Marxism will be understood together with its meta, which avoids that the thought will become silly. This is I come approaching the end with evidently the relationship of Ernst Bloch to the theology of liberation, the conformal to the requirements of the theology of liberation, which reacted very positively to Ernst Bloch's demands of de-theocratization and demythologization of the representation of God, and to his wish to attach the greatest importance to the atheistic and rebellious elements in the Bible and the Christian doctrine. Ernst Bloch pleads that an authentic Marxism is always obliged to consider seriously an authentic Christianity. This means much more than a simple dialogue of Christians between being conscious of the injustice in this world and opposed to the political conservative attitude of the hierarchy of the church, of both Christian churches, Catholics and Protestants, because he also criticizes severely the political attitude of the Catholic Church and the Vatican since the concordat with Hitler and the declaration of the German bishops in 1936 as a scandalous submission, as a scandalous surrender to the Nazi regime under Pope P. XII. And this is an appeal for a real alliance and cooperation of critical Christians with not dogmatic Marxists, offering their hand to the Christians in the common struggle, in the common fight for justice and another better world, without exploiting hunger and violence. Since 1970, since the publication of Gustavo Gutierrez, Ernesto Cardenal's and Leonardo Boff's books on theology of liberation, in Nicaragua, in Peru, and in Brazil, this alliance became effective and had a great political influence not only in Nicaragua, where Christians were fighting on the side of the Sandinist Liberation Army, but also in Brazil, in Peru, in Bolivia, and in Chile. Left Christians, I remember this because I have been there. I was 1 year, in 1972 in Chile, during the socialist government of Salvador Allende, which was overthrown by a fascist coup d'etat of Pinochet in September 1973. Left Christians have been very present in the socialist government of Salvador Allende in Chile from 1970 to 1973. MACU and Izquierda Cristiana. There, Ernst Bloch's principle of hope was really appreciated by the believers in the pastorals and comunidades de base of the theology of liberation, and it was considered as an excellent manifesto for a large mobilization of the lower and exploited classes against all forms of capitalist, colonialist and imperialist violence and domination. Exactly in this militant perspective, Ernst Bloch is concluding his book, Atheism in Christianity, with the following optimistic vision and appeal. And I finish with this quotation, but it seems to be very significant. If there is a real Christian understanding for the emancipation and the suffering of those who are miserable and carrying the burden, when in Marxism the depths of the realm of liberty will remain the substantial content of the revolutionary consciousness. In this case, the alliance of revolution and Christianity in the Peasants' War will not be the last, and it will be successful. On the word of Florian Geyer, this great fighter in the war of German peasants, was written the slogan, nulla crux, nulla corona. This also ought to be the shibboleth, a keynote of a not alienated Christianity, and that was there is really and really inexhaustible, emancipatory, gives us the key word of a Marxism becoming conscious of his deep dimensions. Vivat sequentes, Marxism and the dream of the absolute are now united in the same campaign, im gleichen Gang und Feldzugsplan. The no more alienated man and the dreams not yet discovered of a possible world. They are both present in the experimentation future and in the experimentation called the world. As Nicolas Nazar underlines in his article in The Guardian, 2009, this is, in short, really this biblical philosophy, or rather theodicy, which can be defined as the attempt to justify God's way to man. But this is an extremely hard task. Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much, Arno. I think this is a really amazing essay, and I really appreciated it. Also, I think Rainer said yesterday that Bloch is difficult to read, and you've taken the work on your shoulders to make it understandable to us. So thank you for that. Any comments?